Welcome back to the after credits scene. Moon Knight has finally premiered on Disney Plus, and we're here to help you count down the top 10 Easter eggs in episode 1. Full disclosure here, some of these eggs are less eggs and more explanations. As our character Steven struggles with his personality disorder, he experiences blackouts, and so a few of our eggs will be our way of helping you fill in the gaps a bit. So, here we go! As Steven boards the bus to work, he passes a store in the background with the billboard Atlantis written over it. This might be a nod to the home of the Marvel character Namor, the Submariner, but more than likely it's a reminder that we'll be dealing with a lot of lost civilizations and mythologies during this show. Next, as Steven practices his tour guide skills in the museum, he passes a QR code on the wall that is not just part of the background, but in fact a link to a Marvel site where you can read a digital version of the comic Werewolf by Night number 32. This is where we see the first appearance of Moon Knight. As Steven works on inventory with Donna in the gift shop, he mentions that a poster of the Ennead is actually missing 2 of the 9 gods it claims to depict. While the concept of a supergroup of Egyptian gods was not widely accepted in Egyptian culture, Marvel has adapted a version of these gods across several comics, even including them in their own pocket of the multiverse. Perhaps these beings, like the gods of Asgard, exist in the multiverse like their own version of Celestials. Either way, Steven seems to know an awful lot about them, and chances are this pops up again later on. The golden statue man Steven talks to in the park is actually named in the credits as Crawley. In the Moon Knight comics, Crawley is an informant and ally of Moon Knight that he frequently uses to get information on all things seedy in the criminal underworld. For our story, you can probably bet that Crawley knows more about Steven than even Steven does. When Steven blacks out and then comes to in a grassy field, we can see glass on the ground from the window he just busted out of. As the camera pans upward, you can see this window where the men emerge from. In piecing this scene together, this means that more than likely Marc jumped out of the window and knocked himself out when he hit the ground. When he did, that's where Steven's personality takes over, and Steven thinks he's simply waking up. What's more interesting is the city Steven wakes up in is a rather interesting callback to a familiar location in the comics called Doomstadt. The 2 locations look eerily similar to one another, and while this may be a coincidence, the city of Doomstadt is home to another famous Marvel villain, Doctor Doom. We'll have to wait to see if this was just a clever nod or more of a sly introduction into the world of Doctor Doom and the Fantastic Four. As Steven begins uncovering Marc's hidden things in his flat, he finds a cell phone hidden in the wall along with a vehicle key. The key appears to be an Uber key with a giant U on it that could belong to one of Steven's personalities, Jake Lockley. In the comics, Jake is the cab driver that Marc's personality uses to gather intel and use as a cover. It seems that perhaps the writers have made Jake an Uber driver instead of a cabbie, a much more explainable way to hide yourself instead of leaving a cab parked inoperable for days along at a time. As Steven inspects Marc's phone, among the many calls to and from Layla, we see a pause across the name Duchamp. Jean-Paul Duchamp appears in several Moon Knight comics as a French soldier that Marc Spector befriends in Africa. Duchamp becomes instrumental in Marc eventually becoming Moon Knight. Known by Marc as Frenchie, he even shows up in later comics as Moon Knight's personal helicopter pilot. When Steven realizes Gus has miraculously grown a second fin, he questions the pet store owner who remarks that Steven came in yesterday. We can piece together that clearly someone, probably Marc, replaced the fish. Why? Because when Marc wakes up and proceeds to run off to Bavaria for 3 days, he forgets to feed the fish. Upon returning and covering his tracks by hiding his phone in the wall, he realizes that the fish is dead and proceeds to replace it. Steven's awareness of this is merely the tip of the iceberg in terms of the lives that the other parts of Steven lead that he will soon uncover. It's also of note that historically, goldfish are known to have 6-second memories as well. This is another clever nod to Steven's problem of blacking out and losing time across the entire episode. Known by several names, dissociative identity disorder, or DID, can cause someone to have multiple personalities that live completely separate lives from one another, or sometimes without even knowledge of one another. From the elevator scene, which is reminiscent of the many levels of memory we can see in the movie Inception, to the use of multiple mirrors to show the different sides of Stephen, it's obvious that the writers and directors of the series are going to great lengths to show the connections, barriers, and layers to Stephen's personality. This is just something cool that you need to pay attention to in future episodes. So what else did you notice? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of our other content, from episode reviews and predictions to Bible studies and just general rants. And as always, when the next one drops, we'll see you right back here. Later.